Think your dog hates grooming because they're stubborn? Think again.
You are stubborn!
The truth is, some common mistakes that we make are actually making things worse. For them and for you. With about 15 years of experience in this industry, I've really come to understand that there are typically 5 different surprising reasons behind your dog's grooming struggles. But I'm going to give you advice that I have learned along the way to help fix them. And overall, how to make grooming a less stressful and a more positive experience for you and your pup. Let's talk about what grooming can be like for a dog. It usually comes with restraints of some kind, being sprayed with water, body manipulation, and a lot of touching, and usually by someone who's a bit of a stranger to them. And if they have mats or tangles of any kind, this can cause, at minimum, tugging on the skin, and at worst, pain. There are loud noises, forced air pushing against their skin, vibrations, and different temperatures, but what do all of these actions have in common? Well, it's that they can cause sensory overload. Grooming obviously involves a lot of different sensations. The sound of the clippers, the feel of the brushes, the smell of the shampoos even, and even water splashing during the bath. For some dogs, especially those who are more sensitive or anxious, this can be overwhelming. And here's where you might unknowingly be making it worse. If you're rushing through grooming, using loud, vibrating tools, and you're not giving the dog time to adjust properly, they might associate the entire process with stress. But here's how to fix it. Start slow, let the dog sniff and explore the tools before you use them. Turn the clippers and dryers on and off from a distance so they can get used to the sound. If there is a dial, slowly turn up the speed and the sound so that the dog adjusts to that as well. Reward them for staying calm. It's all about building trust and reducing the sensory overload. I always recommend doing a bath and tidy up on puppies, as this is a great introduction into grooming practices without having to go through the entire process. Reason number 2 is past bad experiences. If your dog's been groomed before and it didn't go well, maybe they were accidentally nicked or had a nail cut too short, introductions to the tools were pushed too quickly and maybe too far, maybe they were handled a little bit too roughly, or just got overwhelmed. They're going to remember that. Dogs are great at associating feelings with specific events. One bad grooming session can leave a lasting impression for a lifetime on a dog. There's a reason why Pavlov's dog drooled when they would hear the bell sound. They were conditioned to expect food. Dogs are wired to be conditioned to think, to feel, and to do certain things for humans for thousands of years. And that's why we have different breeds with different jobs and in different groups. You can't simply turn that off and expect a whole new blank slate a second time around. So how do we make this worse? Well, if we approach grooming frustrated, rushed, or anxious, we might reinforce their fear. Dogs can really pick up on our energy, so if you are stressed, they're gonna feel it. Dogs can even pick up on the most minute facial expressions and body language as well. As I mentioned, they have spent thousands of years being bred to do just that. But all that being said, dog grooming can take a lot of patience. I would be lying if I said I have never been so stressed out that I've had to cry at work. Unfortunately, it just happens. But here's the fix. Take a deep breath. Go into grooming with a calm, positive attitude. Use treats, praise, and breaks during the process to make it less intimidating. If your dog had a really traumatic experience in the past, it might be worth working with a professional groomer or a trainer even to recondition their responses to grooming. This can take a lot of time, but I've had many great owners willing to put in the work to help their dogs learn and reprogram their emotional responses to different aspects of grooming that they don't like. It's a lot of slow, comforting, positive conditioning and building trust with cooperative care. Now, this one is big. Pain or discomfort. Dogs might resist grooming because something actually hurts. For example, brushing out mats can pull on their skin. Clippers can get too hot and sometimes can burn. A nail trim that is too short causes pain. Remember, we talked about cutting the quick. And here's the kicker. Sometimes we don't realize we're causing discomfort. Using the wrong tools, brushing too hard, or even forgetting to check the temperature of our bath water can all contribute. And this is something that I know very personally. I used to groom a dog who lived to the ripe old age of 18 years old. Now, into his senior years, he had very few teeth remaining, and because of this, his tongue no longer stayed in his mouth. Now, as you can imagine, this does get quite gross. You know, the fur around the mouth tends to get crusty and stained, like a yellow or orangish kind of color, and it tends to smell. So we started to shave the old fella's face because this just prevented all this, but he was still able to have his long coat on his body. So he had a nice, short, shaved, poodle type face. And we did this for years, and he was a really nice dog and really great to groom. Then eventually, over time, he would try to bite the clippers and my hands when I tried to shave his face, which was totally out of character for him. Now, I brought this up with his owner and we discussed different scenarios, like maybe, he's getting older, maybe he's getting dementia, something like that. But overall, we just decided that maybe it would be best if he took the dog to his vet to get checked out to see if there was anything going on with him. Well, it turned out that one of his very few remaining teeth was infected, and the owner did opt to have it removed. Let me tell you, this dog turned back into the angel that he was once before. It was a night and day difference. So I know firsthand that pain can really trigger behavior changes and how they tolerate grooming. Now, here's how to fix this. Now, obviously, in the circumstances with the client I was just talking about, instructing the owner to take the dog to the vet for an examination was the fix here. But that won't always be the case, as some scenarios just won't work for this. In certain cases, tooth extraction cannot be performed on a dog for various reasons. Sometimes it does have to do with age. And sometimes arthritis can still ache even with intervention from the vet. Neurological conditions might cause intermittent pain as well. So in these cases, the best you can do is just investing in the right tools for the job. Sharp, high quality clippers, slicker brushes that won't scratch the skin, mat splitters instead of yanking out tangles, anything that makes the process of grooming go quicker and easier. Also, check with the dog throughout the process. If they're flinching, trying to pull away, take a step back and maybe see what's going on. Make a note of this or any changes to behavior and let the owner know. Reason 4. Inconsistency. Dogs thrive on routine, and if grooming only happens once in a blue moon, it can feel like a huge, unfamiliar ordeal. Imagine going to the dentist after skipping cleanings for years. It's not very fun, right? And here's how we're making it worse. If grooming is inconsistent, your dog won't have the chance to get used to it. And if it only happens when they're matted or when they're dirty, they'll associate grooming with discomfort and even worse, punishment. And this is the fix. Make grooming a regular part of your routine. Even if it's just a quick brush every day or nail trimming every couple weeks, a regular bathing schedule as well really helps. That consistency helps your dog see grooming as a normal part of life and not something to dread. I was actually reminded of a success story of mine from over a decade ago, solved simply by consistency. And I stumbled upon this on a Facebook group. I was actually searching for something else in the group that I'm a part of, and I just happened to see this come up as an old post. But anyways, I felt like I had almost completely forgotten about this client. And it brought such a big smile to my face because both him and we really worked to build a lot of trust between us, so it was super nice to see a picture of him. When he first came to me, he was a young dog, but he was matted, and he was maybe 10 months at the youngest, but he was probably edging towards the year old, and he had never been groomed before, so this was his first haircut, and he was not just matted, he was a pelt, really. So he had no prior grooming experience, so again, that can be a problem, but he also didn't have anything bad happen to him either, but he was just a really anxious and nervous dog from the get-go. I could just tell with his disposition that he was just naturally going to be more anxious than some other dogs. Obviously, a solid pelt takes a lot of time to remove, and it's a lot to ask from a dog, especially one who has never been groomed before, so they don't even know the process. So this was going to be a very difficult case. By the end of it, essentially, he was groomed. He had most of his haircut pretty decently done, but his face was the biggest issue. He would try to bite anything that went near it. My hands, the scissors, clippers, like I tried various different tools to try and get him used to it, but anything approaching his face from the sides, from the top, from the front, I tried different angles. Did not like any of it. He was really, really upset by this. Now, luckily, unlike his body, his face was not matted to the extent that his body was. In fact, it was fairly tangle-free. I don't know why that was, but it was lucky. I was able to get his face somewhat groomed. He looked a little bit like he went through a weed whacker. This owner was particularly appreciative though, and we talked about what his condition was, what his behavior was like, and we decided the best thing for him is to go on a 4-week schedule. So every 4 weeks he would come and we would alternate between doing a haircut and doing a bath and tidy up. Now, the reason why we chose this is because his body he was pretty good for. He had, his little finicky spots, but generally speaking, he's very tolerant of having his body groomed, but very intolerant of having his face groomed. So this method, he would be getting his face groomed every time he came. Now, why was this good? Well, things become less scary over time, the more they happen, and I was able to kind of work on what does he tolerate better and how can we work on that, and stopping before he reached a threshold where we were scaring the pants off of him. So just, a little bit more every time expecting of him. And by 6 months, I was able to do his face fairly well, fairly decently. I mean, it was still a little weed whackery, but by 6 months with scissors, he was letting the scissors near his face. And by a year, he was tolerant of clippers being used on his face. So this was a huge win for him. And it was a super proud moment for both me and his owner, and I'm sure himself as well. So it was just such a good feeling, and this whole thing was just solved by consistency. In nearly the first year of his life, he was only groomed once. In the second year of his life, he was groomed 12, 13 times essentially, because he was coming every 4 weeks. So that's a huge difference. And for him, it really, really paid off. The regularity of his grooming was really what this dog thrived in. Finally, let's talk about your dog's personality. Some breeds were bred to be naturally more independent, stubborn, or anxious. These traits can affect how they respond to grooming. But here's the thing. You can't change your dog's personality that has been bred into them for thousands of years. You can adjust how you work with it. Here's how we make this worse. Trying to force a nervous dog to sit still or expecting a high energy pup to stay calm during an hour-long or more grooming session is setting everyone up for failure. The fix is to work with your dog's personality instead of against it. Break grooming into shorter sessions for anxious dogs and make it fun for high energy breeds by incorporating play or training into the process. For independent dogs, patience and positive reinforcement tend to pay off. I know with my own dog, Otis, he absolutely hated the blow dryer when I first got him, and essentially we would just work on it. There was a lot of times as a pup he was still pretty damp, but mind you, he is a short hair dog, so it's not as detrimental if he air dries, but essentially we just worked in slow building sessions to build up his tolerance, and I incorporated play and a lot of praise and treats into this, and eventually he stopped biting my blow dryer. It's actually quite good now. He stands perfectly still. He's really ideal, which is, it all paid off in the end. For a while there, I was questioning what I did to myself. So overall, here are my top tips for making a more positive experience during the grooming process for you and your dog. And tip number 1 is to desensitize slowly. Take it one step at a time. Don't try to tackle the entire thing in one session. As I mentioned earlier, I usually do bath and tidies on puppies to get them acquainted with the process, so you're not expecting the whole works at once kind of thing. And as I mentioned with Otis, we worked very slowly over time, building sessions longer and longer until he was much more tolerant of the whole thing. 2, use rewards. Treats, toys, and praise all go a long way in how your dog associates grooming with good things as opposed to negative feelings. Number 3, go at their own pace. So this is very important. If your dog's showing signs of stress at all, take a break. There's no need to rush. It's very easy to move on. For dogs who hate the blow dryer, sometimes I will stop and then I'll trim their nails, for example, and then I'll go back to blow drying. I break it up so it's not all at once. And number 4, unsurprisingly, is work with a pro. If you are struggling, a professional groomer or trainer can help. We've seen it all. We can offer tips and ones that are specifically tailored to your dog's specific needs. Goal is to make grooming something that your dog at very minimum tolerates and hopefully actually enjoys. But one of the biggest fears when it comes to grooming tends to be nail trimming. And I can help solve that problem with these super easy and super short daily training sessions that I go over in this video right here that you need to check out.